So I've been doing a lot of internal work over the last few years, shifting my perspective and the way I approach life. And I tend to be kind of an analytical person, so for a long time, I sort of used my intellect, I think, as a bit of a crutch to get through life without really having, investing too much in, the real world, as it were. There are investments that I've made and, commitments that I stuck to. But, the place that I found myself in was, very lonely and, unrewarding in the sense that I wasn't, really going for what was in my heart. And, lately, after the passing of my, friend, it just made me realize that, there's not a lot of time on this earth. And, when we lose somebody, we're always, that's sort of like when everyone allows themselves to start expressing the love that they felt for them. People will always say the nicest things about, their relatives and their loved ones after they've passed. But then, when you look at how they treated each other, during their life, often, all these things were unsaid, and, so I realized, that I don't want to look back and feel like I wasn't there for the people that I loved. That I was afraid to put myself out there because it was going to be painful, and that I would, be lost in the process somehow. And, it's like, recently, I've been feeling, out of my comfort zone quite a bit. I've been far more open and been, more spontaneous and, going sort of from my gut, from my heart. And, it's like, the way that impacts on other people, they don't always know what to make of it. It's unusual. People don't really get it. It scares them. Most people are, used to living in a shell. And, for good reason, because when we're children, we're, sort of abused for being ourselves. And, don't get too excited, don't get too happy, don't wear your emotions too much on your sleeves, be a studious person who follows the rules, and then, one day there will be a payoff, and then it's like, okay, I'm a good boy, I'm working towards the goals that I'm told to, but, meanwhile, what's really inside of us is just kind of like dying on the vine. And then, those of us who sort of make it to the end of all this bullshit that we're taught, it's like, oh yeah, well, now you have all this stuff and, these achievements, you might get them. And, on paper it might look good, but, what about what really lived inside of you, What did you do with that your entire life? And it's like when you look back at it, it's like, my real self never really got to live past the point of childhood. I gave up on myself, at some point in my childhood, and then I put all my feelings aside and I tried to rigidly adhere to, what's, the people that I believed had my interests at heart, were telling me. So, it's not an easy thing to put your heart out there, because it's probably going to get crushed. it's going to get crushed, and it's going to get crushed over and over, and people aren't going to understand you. But, to me, I know what it's like to be a dead man on the inside, hoping that, life will someday, magically work in my favor. But, you got to be there. You, the real you, the real you has to be there to show up, to participate in your life. Otherwise, you're just like a character walking on a stage, pretending your way through things, and then, people like the pretend version of you, and they never really get to see the real you. Who is the real you? Well, the real you, if you haven't been it for a long time, if you haven't practiced it for a long time, it's going to come out where you left it. And you probably left it somewhere way back, early in childhood. So when you start being your real self, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. You're gonna say some dumb shit. You're gonna, be grandiose. Perhaps, you'll overshare, again and again, and people will take things that you say the wrong way, the way you didn't mean them. But it's like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go back into the shell where it's safe, or are you gonna accept the fact that people may not understand, and maybe they never will? So that's part of being our real self. Either it's better to get rejected as your real self, even your childish, stupid, immature self, than it is to get accepted as your fake, fucking, responsible, person who's just a character, a facade, just existing their way through life, So, anyhow, these are some of the thoughts that are been going through my mind, with what I'm dealing with and how I'm approaching life. And I wrote this poem. It sort of describes, this experience that I've just described in other words, but in a more poetic sense. It's called Unknown Being. I stepped forward. I knew nothing. Though I thought a lot about this moment, everything that was on my mind was something that had come and gone. And so the unknown was calling. I had exhausted every corner of the building that I had lived in, become a master within a temple that was crumbling. And now again, I knew nothing, and yet my mind was filled to the brim, and my hopes and dreams seemed like poisons on which I couldn't depend on in this wilderness that I found myself in. Who was this man? Was there really any trace left within him? Was there really nothing he could bring here of the things that he had known? Was it me who was there? Was there really nothing he could bring here of the things that he had known? Was it me who was crumbling, or my constructions? I loved my pretty creations, but I also hated them. And underneath everything, there was a different being, more me than I had ever been, yet unknown. All right, so I'll leave it there, guys. Hope you enjoyed this probably a rare insight into a human being's mind. I don't think many people really, go to the places that I go. And so, if nothing else, I guess I get to say that I was a unique person, when it's all said and done. Anyhow, you guys have a good one.